Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Finite and today I want to respond to part of the massive May Studio blog post in respect to expansion content delivery for Guild Wars 2, both Future and Legacy. If you missed it, a few days ago ArenaNet released a 3,000 word blog, this topic being just one of many covered. Now, if you would like to listen to an audio reading of that post rather than reading all those 3,000 words, links below to my Patreon and or subscribe star pages. There's been quite a bit of worry in the community since the last studio update a few months back, where sweeping changes were announced. So let's recap, or rather let the devs recap for us.
We're changing how we deliver updates to the game so that we can adopt a more consistent release schedule, minimize content droughts, and increase our support to the core game. Rather than releasing an expansion every 2 to 4 years with 1 to 2 seasons of living world in between, we'll be releasing smaller expansions with a lower price much more frequently.
If you are a veteran player, you will be all too familiar with the aforementioned content droughts. They've been a recurring feature since launch and have adversely affected the game's retention of new players and growth generally. The promise of a predictable, consistent content release schedule is one that many players, me included, have been hoping for. However, there are worries around these changes too. Other games have opted for smaller content patches at a higher cadence with mixed results. There are concerns that the current epic scale and design-rich game mechanics will be sacrificed for expedience, vital features lost to the cutting room floor, storylines dead-ended due to this new, more constrained focus. Now, to be clear, I do not think, not for one moment, this would be the developers' intention. They see the pros and cons of these changes far better than anyone on the outside. I imagine they are painfully aware of other games in the genre whose content has suffered due to this type of delivery. This knowledge forearms them to avoid some, if not all, of these possible pitfalls.
In this new model, the first release in an expansion cycle will introduce a new story arc and setting, 2 new open world maps, 2 strike missions, new gameplay and combat features, new masteries, and new rewards. In the following quarterly updates, we'll add story chapters, an additional open world map, challenge mode for the strike missions, a new fractal dungeon and challenge mode, new rewards, additions to the new systems introduced in that expansion, and, depending on the release plan for that expansion, new gameplay and combat features.
Now that sounds like a great deal of content, but let's look at what players got with the Path of Fire expansion and its linked Season of the Living World, Season 4. And the timescale is important here too. Path dropped September 22nd, 2017, with Season 4's final episode, War Eternal, releasing on May 14th, 2019. That's 19 months and 13 days. In the new release schedule, this would represent 2 expansions, one with a full year of quarterly updates, the other halfway through its patch cycle. Bear that in mind. Okay, so with Path, we got 5 new, very large, content-dense maps at release, with 6 more added with Season 4. That's 11 very large maps in total. Maps had to be large because mounts were introduced to the game with Path. So that's 5 brand new mounts on release, a Herculean task to be sure, with 2 added in Season 4. Each mount has its own mastery system too, with an additional Crystal Champion mastery just added for good measure. So that's 8 mastery tracks in Path of Fire. And it doesn't end there. There were quest lines and collections and treasure hunts for the Sky Skill, the Griffin, the Roller Beetle. All of them had additional content around them. This is a staggering amount of work for any team, just this one feature alone. Next up, we got 9 new Elite Specialisations, each adding 2 new exotic weapons for each specialization, along with armor skins and collections associated, each elite having a new weapon skill, heal skill, utility skills, elite skills, alongside their build traits. So this is massive undertaking for the developers. But I'm not done yet. So there were 3 raid wings added with Path of Fire: the Hall of Chains, Mithrite Gambit, and the Keys of Adagim. So that's 12 raid encounters over the 3 wings. And of course we have the guild hall added, the Windswept Isle, and then 18 new adventures were added across Path and Season 4. 116 bounties, i.e. bounty bosses, added across the Path maps. And of course, let's talk about gears. So there were 5 new armor sets added with Core Path and 5 more with Season 4. There were 7 new weapon sets with Path, 5 more with Season 4. There were 3 armor set attribute combinations added as well, along with a multitude of achievements just for the expansion. And lest we forget, last but not least, Rangers got 5 new pets to tame. What about legendaries, you ask? Well, Coalescence arrived with Path, and I do believe that the 2nd generation of legendary weapons was still trickling out at this point as well. So let's remind ourselves that the guiding principle of the studio's restructuring and new content delivery overhaul is to give players more content more consistently. So in that same 19-month period with this new schedule, let's see what we might have gotten and compare. So in that time period, we'd get 2 expansions with additional story content added quarterly. Although, caveat, we don't know that story will be added every quarter. Each expansion would add 2 new open world maps, so that's 4 in total over the 2 expansions, with a possible additional 1 added each quarter. But I hasten to add that we don't know we're going to get a new map in every quarterly release. There could be a Joris Marches situation happening where a single map is slowly opening up. We'll have to wait and see. In this 19-month period, we would get 4 strike missions over the 2 expansions, with challenge modes added in the quarterly update. So, with the raid of Path of Fire, we got 12 boss encounters, and here we'd get 4 raid bosses over 2 expansions. We did get 4 strike missions with End of Dragons, and each metamap is really a kind of like an open world raid boss. But I mean, you let me know what you think in the comments. I kinda miss the raids. It's confirmed we will get 2 new fractals over the 2 expansions with challenge mode. So that's a new fractal each expansion. So it's a new fractal every 12 months. The post also tells us that we'll get 2 rounds of new player/combat systems added, 1 for each expansion, which I think is replacing Elite Specialisations. I have no idea whether every profession is going to get a new combat system. I don't know if they're going to get access to new weapons each expansion. At this point, we just don't have enough information. It sounds like that might be happening. We'll have to wait and see. There should also be 1 complete set of masteries per expansion. How many individual mastery lines we're going to get is unclear. If we look back, the Cool Game has 3, Heart of Thorns has 6, Path of Fire has 8, Ice Brood has 6, and End of Dragons has 5. So can we estimate that we're going to get maybe 3 or 4 mastery lines added per expansion? So that would be approximately 6 over the 2 expansions to kind of err on the side of caution. We may also get new gameplay systems per Expac. So I think this category might cover things like gliding, mounts, jumping mushrooms, that kind of thing. Maybe even like the bounty system that they introduced. That could be in the ballpark. Maybe mount races or adventures. I'm not sure. New something. And of course, the new shinies. So new armors, weapons, backskins, minis, that kind of thing. Path and Season 4 added 10 new armor sets. Hot 6, End of Dragons 5. How many we will get with these new expansions? They're smaller. I'm guessing crystal ball time. 3 armor sets, 3 weapon sets. Could be in the ballpark. However, if we look at the most recent kind of legacy expansion, there are a lot of individual armor pieces and backskins linked to game mode, so they could be leaning in that direction. The big question, does the new expansion promises of gameplay and loot measure up to the old. And the truth of the matter here is we will not know until after the fact. So when we revisit this, as the new content arrives, we can do a clear-eyed comparison. And actually looking back, I think it's quite breathtaking the amount of content the devs managed to deliver in these legacy expansions. It was quite astonishing, so hats off to you. That's going to be worth a lot of trust, their ability to deliver this kind of fantastic content. But anyway, I digress. Back to the post.
Alongside these expansion content updates, we're beefing up our support for the core game so we can iterate and improve on Guild Wars 2, even while releasing new expansion content on a more consistent schedule. Once that expansion's year-long cycle is complete, the next expansion will be just around the corner. You can read a more detailed overview of the change in the February studio update.
It's great to hear the core game is going to be getting the attention it needs. I'm grateful for that, as I know the team has finite resources. And in truth, I think we can all recognise there are a few encounters which are in dire need of rejuvenation, renovation. Top of mind, the disastrous Krytan battle. I mean, that's at the top of the list for me, I think. This is going to be my personal opinion here, so this is, for me, without doubt, one of the worst boss fights in the game. And it's the capstone of the personal story, which is every player's first interaction with the game, with the world, with its lore, its instant storytelling, and solo bosses. I mean, this battle is the culmination over weeks of effort and careful planning and narrative choices and sacrifice, all of which is utterly squandered, let down by this lackluster, point-and-click, wasted opportunity. If the studio wishes to kind of shore up new player retention, this should be overhauled as soon as possible. This boss should be exciting, it should be a spectacle, it should be challenging and clever and meaningful and have some pathos. It's none of those things. And here's the rub, the devs have made some of the most brilliant boss encounters in the entire genre, in the entire MMO multiverse, and this pinnacle battle deserves that same level of creativity and innovation, and I gotta be honest, so too do we players. We deserve that in Krytan, in that boss. The core game deserves a capstone worthy of note. And honestly, I think a critical eye should be cast over all this type of zenith encounters in the game to date. Make capstone bosses a masterclass of content design, not unfinished like Krytan and Dragonstand. So if you're unaware, the Dragonstand encounter is missing an entire lane, overseen by the Nightmare Court. The court's narrative evolution was cut entirely from Heart of Thorns, which is a crying shame, and the open world battle on Dragonstand had a planned second phase as we chased the dragon up the corrupted tree. But unfortunately, we never got to play that. The same is true of Krytan, with a second phase planned where we entered the body of the dragon to finish him off, much like the final Kraukatoric story encounter. Now, to be clear, I don't think for one moment these kind of least love encounters were intended, nor do I think that the devs don't care about them. Quite the contrary, I imagine they were the result of time constraints beyond these creatives' control, and the fact the team is dedicated time and personnel to the legacy game shows their commitment to making good on historically underperforming content. I just hope these capstone bosses, these end of expansion experiences, factor into their plans. Let me know your opinion below. Agree, disagree, you have other ideas entirely? Let's talk about it. Okay, back to the post.
Question: do smaller expansions mean that there are fewer developers working on Guild Wars 2? No, quite the contrary. In fact, thanks to the growth that Guild Wars 2 saw in 2022, we're increasing the size of the Guild Wars 2 development team. Largely in content and systems design, we've already hired a bunch of new folks since January, and we'll be opening additional roles throughout the year.
This is, of course, wonderful news. for our community in general, for the developers who bring Tyranny to life, the game we adore is financially healthy, which means we can expect many years of Guild Wars 2, which is something to celebrate for sure.
Question: how does this shift result in more support for the core game? Let's start by defining the core game. Core is typically viewed as synonymous with the base Guild Wars 2 experience, anything that doesn't require an expansion. Systems-wise, that's a huge chunk of the game. Core Tyria and the story up to level 80, professions, world versus world, structured player versus player, dungeons, fractals of the mist dungeons, crafting, the list goes on. In the context of supporting the live game and our new development strategy, Core also encapsulates the long list of content and features that have been added to the game over the past decade. When we introduce features to Guild Wars 2, we want those new tools to be relevant across the entire game, past, present, and future. Because the systems introduced in expansions like Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns, Path of Fire, and End of Dragons are so ubiquitous and central to the player experience, they deserve iteration just as much as any true core system.
So if you're unsure of the kind of content the team is talking about here, in my head I'm thinking about things like gliding and mount access across the core maps, but a little later in the post the team shares a kind of laundry list of tweaks and quality of life features added, so stick about.
Over the past decade, our development strategy has skewed more towards addition rather than iteration. That's not a bad thing by default, but every development strategy has trade-offs, different pros and cons. In this case, it meant that the core game took a back seat. Meanwhile, the number of features slowly crept upward without a plan or designated resources to maintain them. More than ever, we're confident in our future, and we're committed to long-term support for this community. This is why we're taking on projects that will keep the game healthy in the long run, like refactoring large swathes of old code, optimizing our development tools, future-proofing World v World with the world restructuring system, and updating our engine. Improving existing systems is also a key part of our strategy for Guild Wars 2, and by rescoping and redefining our future expansions, we were able to get started on core game improvements right after the release of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons. In a little over a year, those teams delivered a significant list of changes, all while Expansion 4 has been in development. These changes include the return of Living World Season 1, the Steam launch, updated visuals and mechanics for multiple world bosses, emboldened mode for raids, reworked fractal mistlock instabilities, updated default key bindings and settings for new players, custom key binding profiles, multiple major profession updates, a new super adventure box map, an update to dungeon, strike mission and raid rewards, high contrast mouse cursors, a change to prevent all story instances from ejecting players who cross the instance boundary, World v World quality of life improvements and rewards updates, a wide range of improvements to the new player experience, bank access from the Mystic Forge, a wardrobe and die randomizer option, a Black Lion statuette overhaul to make collecting and exchanging them more rewarding, mega server map queues, allied player visual effect filtering, spoiler, and more.
Honestly, I completely understand the team privileging new content over old. However, after such a long tenure, I think a little retrospective rejuvenation will pay dividends in the long run. A word of caution, other games in the genre have discovered, to their detriment, one should tread carefully when rejuvenating a much-loved realm and world. Also, that is an impressive list of improvements, and I want to highlight a few that I think players may have kind of missed or just glossed over. So mega server map queues are a much needed feature, especially for meta maps. I think we all know the frustration of trying to join a full server. This new feature allows players to queue, just like they do in World v World when a borderland has reached capacity. You can get on with your day, and when a place opens up, you just filter into the map. No fuss, no muss. This is excellent. I also love the bank access from the Mystic Forge, which is another quality of life feature which eliminates an unintended pain point for players. This removes the requirement to retrieve components from your bank or wherever the heck you got them when you're using the Mystic Forge. So as long as you have the materials in your bank and or your bag if you want, you're good. You can make as many legendaries as you want or whatever you're cooking up in there. Also, I have found the high contrast cursor to be a lifesaver, quite literally on a number of occasions. You see, I don't use add-ons at all, not a one, so this is a completely new, much loved feature for me, so yeah, very happy with that. And finally, the new Alliance player visual effects filtering system. I am so happy with this one. The visual clutter in Guild Wars 2 is infamous, so having the ability to minimize the particle effect overload is truly transformational and wondrous. And I imagine that there's likely to be some real-world power saving happening here too, so it's just all win as far as I can see.
Despite that progress, there's still much left to do. We take a lot of pride in our work and making our players happy, and there's a nearly infinite list of things that we'd like to do. However, both time and development resources are finite. If you've ever heard a developer talk about constraints, that's what they're lamenting. So we must be very intentional with where we focus our efforts. For now, we're addressing systems that will positively impact as many players as possible. As time goes on, we hope to dig into more niche areas of the game.
I'm not sure if the fortification of new player attention falls into the niche category. Also, I hasten to add, I know I would go back and fight Zayton again happily if the encounter was improved. Would you? I know I've revisited other bosses they've overhauled. Let me know in the comments your opinion. And, okay, the next part is something many players are likely to have some feelings about. So yeah, buckle up kids. It's about to get real.
Question. The February studio update said that future expansions would include combat features and didn't mention elite specializations at all. What does that mean? In the current design and implementation of elite specializations, we feel that with every new expansion, there's been increasingly limited design space left to add new and differentiated roles for each profession. In other words, most of the playstyles that we'd like to see supported for each profession already exist or should exist within their existing elite specialization options. With our next expansion, our goal is to further augment the combat options for each profession by adding new tools to their arsenal and by lifting constraints that will unlock an unprecedented number of playstyle customization options, while keeping the feel of Guild Wars 2 combat true to its origins. Theory crafters are going to be very busy.
It's confirmed. There will be no more new elite specializations added to the game in the foreseeable future. How do you feel about that? Because they have been a box feature since Heart of Thorns. Some players will buy an entire expansion just to get access to the elites. From a design point of view, I can see where the team is coming from, but I think this will be unsettling for many players, understandably so. That said, I do think it's remiss to make snap judgments before trying new content. This could be like a pivotal moment that opens the door to a new era of divergent gameplay, or not. It could be a misstep. Personally, I always hope for the best, but inevitably, we're going to have to wait and see. Time will tell. Now, onwards we go to the final item we're going to be talking about today.
Question. How does the What Lies Beneath quarterly release differ from future expansions' quarterly releases? Beginning with the 4th expansion, there will be new content updates every 3 to 4 months following an expansion release. For context, there was no new Guild Wars 2 End of Dragon story content released between February 2022 and February 2023, largely because the team worked on the expansion up until its release, delaying new content development until a month or two later. Comparatively, the 4th expansion hasn't even been officially revealed yet, and we're already making headway on its quarterly release content. This is one of the biggest reasons we're excited about this transition. Additionally, as we laid out earlier in this blog, the 4th expansion's quarterly releases will be augmented by other types of content and feature updates that aren't included in the Guild Wars 2 End of Dragon's quarterly releases.
So I've got to be real. I am not entirely convinced that comparing the new content release ethos with what followed End of Dragons is a fair comparison. I don't think so. The tail end of End of Dragons could and perhaps should be characterized as a transitional affair. It's hard to argue What Lies Beneath is representational of a normal Guild Wars 2 Living World installment. To me, it seems too little story, too little almost everything, really. I think Path of Fire is a kind of a better benchmark. It was a robust, content-rich experience with Season 4 following at a rapid pace. This is Guild Wars content delivery at its finest, I think. That said, I wholeheartedly welcome the push towards more consistent, predictable content, both as a player of the franchise since 2005, oh wow, yeah, and a content creator since 2014. So honestly, I'm looking to the future of Guild Wars 2 with hope and excitement. How about you? Please do like, share, and subscribe for more Guild Wars goodness in the not too distant future. I will be talking about the blog post's World v World implications next, so do tune in for that. And if you have not tried it yet, and you're listening to the video, thank you for listening, but try Guild Wars 2. There are referral links below to the free-to-play game, which costs you nothing, and the End of Dragons expansion, which just costs you a pretty penny or two. But using any of the referral links does not cost you a penny, and does help out the channel tremendously, thanks to the generosity of ArenaNet and their partner program, of whom I am a proud affiliate. And before you leave, please show some love to my wondrous Patreons on Patreon and Subscribestar, who keep this one-woman show up, running, and, well, variably sane, but they're doing their best, and so am I. But sadly we have come to the end. So, until we meet again, please, stay safe, stay awesome, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye!